Welcome back to What Would You Ask podcast. My next guest, another one of those entrepreneurs from the tank. This guy's got a really interesting story. I'm excited to talk to John from Bouqs. You know, the flower company. I'm going to tell you what he said. This is what John said about his company, right? Buying flowers online sucks. That's what he said. And you know what? For a guy that has a mother that expects flowers on Mother's Day and a wife that expects them more than just Mother's Day, I agree with him, right? And his line continues. It says, you know, Bouqs company makes it suck less. And here's why. And then a bunch of reasons, right? And, you know, the $40 flat fee, and then they don't add in all the surcharges and no added delivery. And I don't know if they've morphed. That's what they came into the tank with. And that was, you know, some time ago, years ago. And so that might have morphed over time, but that's a pretty cool model to go with, right? And here's the key. These are fresh cut and then shipped the day that they're picked, right? I mean, it's like farm to table kind of mentality. And, you know, they're sourced from sustainable Ecuadorian farms that reside, and this is going to remind all of you, you're going to go, oh, I remember that, at the bottom of a live volcano. And I was just chatting with John before we go because I've heard, and he's going to tell the story about the volcano has erupted twice. And he said, fortunately, lava goes down the other way, and the people sometimes have issues with that. I'm thinking, yeah, that's a neighborhood I might want to move out of. I'm just, you know, not going to stay there too long. But anyway, I am excited. Oh, I didn't tell you what season 5, episode 27. We never forget the episodes, John. We're always right on top of things on the hit show Shark Tank. John Tabis, welcome to What Would You Ask podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I didn't even know which episode we were. I knew we were season 5, but
see that, guys? Now he knows. We educated him. That's awesome. That's really cool. John, start us out telling us the story of how this company started. I think it's really interesting to delve that far back.
Yeah, for sure. So back when I was 19, which is a very, very long time ago now, I met my co-founder, JP. We actually started a band together at Notre Dame, Go Irish.
Cool. Go Irish.
And we just became good friends. He was from Ecuador, born and raised just outside of Quito. And his family had run a dairy farm, you know, up in the hills. And then a family friend ran a flower farm. And so he spent time, you know, in the farming industry. And even as a sophomore in college, he decided to study biochemistry because he wanted to work in the floral industry. He planned to move back down there to run a farm. And lo and behold, that's what he did. He met his beautiful bride, Becky, got married, moved back down there, you know, started a family down there, and he became general manager of a flower farm. And as he ran, you know, the farm, he saw issues with it. He saw issues around profitability and growth. He saw issues around they invested a lot of money and time into sustainability and how they treated their people. And yet the end consumer had no idea they did those things. And they did them because they were the right thing to do, but they would have loved to get an economic return. So he's trying to think through, like, how can I, like, you know, brand it or stamp it or convey to the customer that we do these things. And so he reached out to me, and my career had been in sort of brand and strategy at Bain and Disney. And he was like, help me think about this. And I thought it was really fascinating, the farmer side. But then I, you know, sort of what I said, you know, sending online flowers sucks. It did until we came along. And I thought, wow, if he's representative of farmers and I'm representative of consumers, what's going on in between that's really ruining this industry? And it turns out it's a supply chain that really makes no sense. And so we thought, why don't we just replace that supply chain with technology that leverages data, and we can go off and try to, you know, build a better way. And so we've been working on it now we're creeping up on 8 years old.
Wow. Let's get rid of that middleman. Right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So let's jump into your Shark Tank journey. You discover this opportunity, you turn into what most of the sharks say, right, is a product into a business. And now we're thinking, first of all, what inspired you to head to the Shark Tank?
So I was a fan since season 1. I actually worked at Disney when the show was greenlit. I didn't work on, like, you know, shows. I worked in corporate strategy. So, but I learned about it through, you know, the upfronts are coming up and here's a show. And I was like, who's going to watch a show about business? I'm interested, but no one else is going to care. It's way too niche, you know? Turns out this is why I'm not a television executive, because it's really one of the most successful reality TV shows of all time. But but I was excited about it, so I became a big fan. I'd recorded it. I watched it live for the first few seasons, and I'd record it because my wife was like, "I don't want to spend my Friday night watching business stuff with you," which she was not part of the audience. And then I started the company, and we launched in November of 2012, and sort of pushed forward about 8-9 months. An email sort of floated through the UCLA Anderson Graduate School of Business, where I was an alum, and now I'm an adjunct professor. And it just sort of floating around saying, hey, my friend's a producer on Shark Tank. They're looking for startups that have raised some venture capital to kind of like change it up. Because up until season 5, it was all, self-bootstrapped mom and pop businesses out of garages. They wanted to get some new flavors in, And so I thought about it. I was like, wow, I'm a fan, but like we just closed our round of financing. I don't know if I want to go on and ask for more financing when I can't really negotiate the price because we had taken in $1.7 million of venture capital. But I figured, what the heck? I'll just apply and just on a lark, let's see what happens. So we applied, and then we did the video and the application forms and signed away our lives on the 85 million page document that you have to sign. And then lo and behold, they invited us to the next round with sort of the in-person stuff, and that goes pretty well. And we make we do the video and all that stuff, and all of a sudden they're like, well, we would love to have you on the show. And I was like, oh boy, I sort of didn't expect this. And now I'm nervous. Now I'm like, I don't know if I want to go on. I wanted to go on, but I was really nervous about, how some people go on and then the sharks kind of destroy them because they say they're only there for publicity. Because I couldn't negotiate the price, I thought they could get that impression. Because I just couldn't. I had already sold the stock at a certain price. I couldn't give them a better deal.
Right.
And so they wouldn't necessarily know that. I could tell them. But so I was nervous about getting that situation. They're kind of like, you weren't here to get a deal. You were just here for the publicity. And I didn't want to risk the brand, and I didn't want to risk my own personal reputation. But at the end of the day, it was funny. I was on the phone with my sister. I had like a week to decide. And my sister was like, since when are you the person who chooses not to be in front of like 5 to 10 million people? Like when did that happen? And I was like, you're right. I'm going to. And so, thank the Lord that I did, because it was, not looking back on it, passing on that would have been literally the worst thing I could have possibly done in the history of this business.
Yeah.
And so glad to have done it. And it's been, one of the best things that's happened to the company and to me as an individual.
So we're going to get into what happened in the tank in a second. I do want to flash back, since you mentioned it, for season 1. I've mentioned to a few of the entrepreneurs who've come through here, and we're knocking on 100 pretty soon. The days of the elevator doors opening instead of the doors were the old days, and they had the money stacks on the counter. I've watched a lot of those videos. We've had Tiffany Crumans from Ava the Elephant on, and we've had a couple of Omar Solomon from College Hunks Hauling Junk. So we've had a bunch of those guys on, which is funny. It was a different show back then. You're right. It was, we're going to buy your business out. We're taking 60%, 50%. It was a lot different than the two-way, discussion or negotiation that is today. I want to jump into Rob from Walnut Creek, California's question. His question was, and now we're inside the tank, were there key points to your presentation you felt that the sharks needed to understand?
Meaning that they didn't understand it in my pitch, or
it was critical for them. Things about your company was critical that they needed to know.
Yeah, so the biggest things that I tried to convey in the pitch was how different the supply chain is the way we do it versus the standard. And the hard thing is about, being in the tank, which, you're there for a while, but an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes isn't that long. And is that most people think they understand how flowers work. They think they understand how this industry works, and it's wildly complex. It's very old school. And so getting people to understand the gravity and sort of the dramatic difference between the way we do it and the way it's standard done was the key thing. That was the biggest thing. Because that is what has fueled the growth of the company. That's why we're now 90 some people. We've done tens upon tens of millions of dollars of revenue, all because of the supply chain. And this is a place where I totally failed. I wanted them to understand that, because that was really what we were building. And what they ended up taking away was more the front end stuff, the consumer stuff. Oh, the pricing or how fast does it ship? We kind of got stuck in what I viewed as small pieces and they viewed as the main piece. And so I failed to really drive them towards what was the key differentiator was our supply chain is unlike any other in the world, and that gives us advantages against the entire industry. And so that was the key thing I needed to convey. And I didn't win. I didn't achieve it. I clearly, we went down this path of sort of consumer experience stuff, like to me, which was details. And we skipped the burger for the bun.
Yeah.
And so that was a strategic failure on my part.
I think you're right about that too. I think you're right on. Ashley's question kind of piggybacks that a little bit, but it's a little bit of the opposite of what Rob was asking. She asked, Ashley from Scottsdale, Arizona, was there weak areas of your business that you were concerned would become an issue during the Q&A with the Sharks?
Yeah. So, the one that ended up becoming the biggest was our speed of delivery.
Yeah.
And where I failed in that one was I should have addressed the speed of delivery in the opening pitch instead of them discovering it through Q&A. They were surprised that our core delivery product from South America was 5 or 6 days delivery.
Yep.
What was weird about it to me was we were growing at a CAGR of like 350% year over year with a 5 or 6 day delivery. And I told them that we were moving to next day delivery within a couple months. And by the time it aired, we had already had it for a couple months. And so it's like, hey, if you're growing at 350% year over year without next day delivery, how much faster are you going to grow when you have it? But because it came up in the Q&A instead of me setting the stage for how this was going to evolve, it became a red herring. It kept being like, oh, like it's just so slow. And I'm like, but it's not going to be slow. Mr. Wonderful even, sort of razzed me about it at the end. And so I think that was one flaw. And then the other flaw was really just our pricing. At the time we had raised that seed round about 3 months before I filmed or something. And the company was valued around $8 million. And that's just expensive.
Yeah.
And I didn't do a great job of setting the context about why that wasn't that expensive. Because trust me, right now, if you had bought at an $8 million valuation,
you'd be good.
you're pretty darn happy.
Yeah.
You're doing way better than the S&P, which has been on a tear for the last decade. So I didn't do the best job of helping them understand in the context of where we were and where we were going, that wasn't that bad of a price. And I think they got hung up on that.
A lot of people our membership ask about editing. How did you feel about the editing? You're in there for an hour plus, a little bit shorter, whatever. We get 7 minutes of it. Anything end up on the editing floor that we should have heard about, would be interested in hearing about?
Yeah, I think the thing about the editing that bothered me the most, and it really wasn't a big deal though, was the sort of shift in time, right? They take a reaction that happened here and they move it over here.
Yeah.
In real life, Mark Cuban was not the first one out. On the show, he was the first one out.
Yep.
That's not what happened. But I get that. They have to take license with it to create the most compelling story. So it's not a big deal. It'd just be weird for me when someone would say something and I'd look at it, I'm like, what? And I'm like, no, I didn't make that face at that time. That's not
It's funny. It's funny you say that, John. I was interviewing this morning, Scott Jordan from Scotty Vest. It's at that vest where you put all your devices in it and it's really nice. Well, he ended up, he went out and talked to Wozniak was one of his board members, and kind of, he was a real brash, bravado guy. And he came in and he said to Kevin and to Robert, you're out and you're out. And he was kind of saying it tongue in cheek. And then later he walked out. Well, they put together the you're out with a walkout, like he did that and then walked out. And he was like, he was mortified. He said, that's not what happened. And it made him look like a pirate. Yeah. And he's like, we had a conversation. I said, you're out. It was like 10 minutes later when I left, and I just turned around, left, and said goodbye. And actually, he went and shook everybody's hand. He said, conveniently, they didn't show that. And that was breaking the rules too, because you're not supposed to, move off your spot towards.
Yeah, and then there was at the beginning, I had a little shtick where essentially I was like appealing to each of the Sharks, and
oh, that's good. Yeah.
I said something along. I can't remember exactly what it was. Like, I'm a Pittsburgh guy, so that was my Mark Cuban connection. Yeah. And I'm what was that pitch? Now I'm misremembering. I know Mr. Wonderful was about making a lot of money. I can't remember. Barbara and Lori were the bouquets. Oh, and Robert was Oh, you can edit all this out. What in the world was Robert? I can't remember. I'll come back to Ken. But anyway, it was a pretty smooth, like, I'm going to appeal to each of you with like a personal anecdote about why we should get along so great. Right.
Love it.
And they cut out like half of it. So it became awkward. And I was like, wait, that was my whole thing, was like, I'm going to butter up to everyone. And then we're going to go into this pitch. And they cut out like half of it. And I'm sure it was just to save time. But those were the two things that I sort of noticed. You know, a lot of our conversation when I was in the tank kind of got really technical. Like Mr. Wonderful got into like public security exposure and why, if I want access to this category, I can just invest in a public company like 1-800-Flowers or FTD. Like what? And we had this good debate about private company, public company, all these types of things. But that was just too inside baseball business. That was never going to be compelling for TV. But that was probably like 20, 30 minutes of conversation where we went kind of deep. So I'm glad that didn't make it in the show because it would have been boring.
You mentioned Pittsburgh. It's like either Pittsburgh's grew in size over the last 20 years or everybody's from Pittsburgh that goes on that show because they want that appeal to say, I'm from Pittsburgh. But there's a ton of Pittsburgh people on the show. I mean, really.
There is. I just remembered.
Yeah.
It was, I said I'm Croatian.
Oh, that's right. There you go.
In my pitch, I said I'm a Pittsburgh guy with Croatian blood, and then Robert started speaking Croatian to me, and I was like, well, like I don't speak Croatian. I'm 30-something% Croatian.
Did they leave that in? They left that part in when they said I'm Pittsburgh born Croatian? Didn't you say it? I think they did.
But anyway, the really good part though was at the end, after they rejected me and I'm walking down the hall, I overhear Robert say, he's definitely not Croatian. Like to the other Sharks. And so now that I know him, I make fun of him. I'm like, no, dude, I really am. I just don't speak the language because I'm like third generation American.
That is so funny. That is awesome. So you walk out of there, you don't end up with a deal. And I want to follow this up because this is a great story and I want to make sure we get this in the time we have. And I also want to make sure that everybody hears about the business, how it's going today, and certainly where we can contact to get our Bouqs, as they say. I like Bouqs. That's a nice name. I think who didn't like that? Barbara? Somebody didn't.
That was the worst name
ever. Worst name ever. Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think it's cool.
Thank you. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Worked out
Imagine if you said, I'm not really into it either. That would be funny. So what happened? So you didn't get a deal, but then this great thing happens. One of the Sharks is looking for flowers for a wedding. Take it from there. John, tell us what happened.
Yeah, so it's funny. We actually had a lot of interaction. One of the things about the Barbara story really quickly is Barbara, trashed the name. And then like 3 weeks afterwards, we saw her name pop up on an account and she's been a very loyal customer ever since. So she didn't like the name, but she liked the flowers. But yeah, so a lot of time passed, maybe 2 years passes. And I'll remember like it was yesterday. I'm sitting at my desk and I have a 3 o'clock meeting. I can't remember who it was, a vendor or somebody, but somebody where I wouldn't know the phone number. And my phone rings at 2:59 and I think it's my call. And I'm just sitting at my desk and I answer the phone. Hey, John, it's Robert from Shark Tank. Just like that. No assistant, no scheduling, just Robert got my number and called my cell phone. And I was like, like I didn't know what to say. I was like, hi, Robert, what's going on? Why are you calling my cell phone at 3 o'clock?
I promise you I'm Croatian. No, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Actually. So I was totally surprised. But Robert, being Robert, because he's just this magnanimous, super kind, interesting guy, just launches into it. It's like, hey, listen, I remembered your display and how beautiful it was and da-da-da. And if you haven't been watching, I was on Dancing with the Stars and I watched Dancing with the Stars back then too. And so I knew all about him and Kim. And he's telling me the story about how they're getting married. And then, he goes into his experience with trying to get flowers for his wedding. And what's amazing about Robert is despite his massive wealth and success, he's a business guy. And so he went around getting quotes and he just felt like they were unfair. Mm-hmm. And he's like, why are they so expensive? He's like, I just don't understand. And so he said, can we talk about you potentially doing our wedding? And we had never done a wedding of that scale. We do like small weddings, 50 person, right, regular person weddings, not 400 people at like the Hilton in Bel Air or whatever it is. But I was like, sure, we can talk. And so Kim came in a couple times and we talked through designs and we showed her some options. And then Robert came in a couple times. And along the way, he learned the business. He started to understand why what we were doing was so different and how the supply chain enabled us to reduce costs. And at the end of the day, I quoted him a price that was really fair to us. Like, we made money on his wedding and saved him 50%. Like, I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars on his wedding. And at the end of it, in the exchange of all of that, he was like, wow. He's like, can I still invest? And I was like, sure. Like, absolutely, you can invest. Like, and we were in the middle of our Series C, which we announced in February of 2017, which was a $24 million investment led by Partech, which is a large venture capital firm in Paris and San Francisco. And so he came in as part of that round. And so at least when I went back on the tank, which was now, I think, 2 years ago, I was, at the time, we were the only company to have gotten rejected in the tank and then get a deal later. So I think that still holds, but all because, we were able to help out Robert with his wedding. And it turned out, I mean, you can Google, Robert Herjavec wedding flowers or whatever. We had chandeliers. We had a wall of flowers.
Wow.
It was epic. I mean, really, like, I think probably like 30, 40,000 stems.
Holy cow.
Large white, like chandelier balls hanging from the ceiling of flowers. It was we did a really good job. It was a lot of work for our team, but we did a pretty amazing job.
Is it true that the colors are, I mean, I remember seeing them when you brought them to Barbara and Lori. It just seemed the colors were brighter than, is that possible? I mean, and somebody mentioned that, I thought.
Yeah. So when you think about, flower growing, everything's relative, right? So I can show you two flowers look largely the same, but one's going to be whatever, a centimeter taller, or the stem is going to be a millimeter thicker, whatever it might be. So there are gradations of everything. So it's hard when you're talking about gradations to see differences, but you can absolutely, based on the way you grow a flower, how you grow it, where you grow it, how you hydrate it, how you cut it, at what stage you cut it, how you preserve it, you can absolutely get bigger blooms, longer lasting blooms, brighter blooms. So I can't clinically, experimentally prove that ours are brighter, but we pick farms specifically because of the way they grow and where they grow for the largest blooms, the longest lasting blooms, and the brightest blooms. And
nice.
So what's crazy about that is our Ecuadorian farms, some of the blooms are so big that we actually can't sell like a dozen roses because they won't fit in our box. Wow. We have to tell them we can't buy your best stuff because we can't do it a dozen. We could do like 8, but nobody wants 8 roses. And so, the way that the science is so sophisticated, again, my co-founder is a biochemist. He spends his time with the farmers, making sure that we're getting the absolute best product for the price.
That's awesome. That's so cool. Another shark story that has to be told, it just has to be, and it came up in some of the research. One of these Shark Tanks was on 2020, and I was asked the question, what was one of the businesses that you regret not investing? Tell that story as well, John.
Yeah, so we were part of, I think it was the 100th episode reunion for Shark Tank on 2020. And so because I was on Shark Tank, I was a guest on 2020. This is what I mean about Shark Tank being like, if I was never on Shark Tank, I'm never going to be a guest on 2020 for any reason, right?
It wasn't because you were at Disney. You worked at Disney back then.
It was not. No one cared that I was once an analyst at the Walt Disney Company. But yeah, so we're part of this special, and what they did was they got the sharks up on stage and they essentially recapped the show, like the first 100 episodes. And one of the topics was us and sort of how we got away. And then we did Robert's wedding, and Robert was telling the story. And as soon as Robert said, we just raised $24 million and the business is going great. And that's when Mark said, yeah, and you know what? That's the one that I wish I would have done. I wish I would have invested in those guys, which is very flattering, but I have to say questionable. Because Ring, Jamie, the founder of Ring, is a friend of mine, lives not too far away. They sold for $1 billion to Amazon. And we've done great. We're still doing great. And we're going to have great things in front of us. But I don't know if I would put Bouqs above Ring as in terms of best exits in Shark Tank history. But it was very flattering. And I know that Mark loved the category. It was just we had raised money and it was a little expensive and that kind of thing. So it's a little feather in our cap. It's nice to have Mark Cuban say, hey, I really wish I'd invested in those guys.
I'd have it on the answering machine. It's, while you're holding on, just have it on a loop. Mark saying that over and over again. It's so, a guy like that saying that this is the one company that's come, think of all I go through all these companies. Trust me, there's a ton of companies out there that go through their studio. So tell everybody what's going on with Bouqs. How has it evolved from what we saw in the tank, and what's next?
Yeah, it's a very different business today. At the time we filmed the tank, I think we were 7 employees. Now we're 93.
Wow.
At the time we worked with probably like 7 or 8 farms solely in South America. Now we work with 140 farms around the world. Ecuador, Colombia, Chile, Peru, across the United States, Canada, East and North Africa. We were about to bring on Japan right when the pandemic hit. So Japan is on the way, and then we'll move into broader Asia. So our network is truly global. We're sourcing from all around the world, all kinds of different flower types. At the time, we had 40 bouquets for $40. Now on the site on average, and that was one size at one price. Now we have about 130 bouquets and plants and other items on the site. We have multiple vases. We have most of them in 3 sizes. So you went from 40 choices to call it 400 choices. Over that time, we deliver next day. We still deliver from South America. It's a more complex business in terms of the way we run it because it's much higher volume.
Yeah.
One of the key things that people see differently is that our flat pricing is now only available to subscribers. And so our sort of original pricing model is still maintained in the subscription product. So you can order, a dozen roses or the equivalent for $38 flat, no shipping, any of that kind of stuff. You just have to sign up for monthly or every other month deliveries. You can skip any time, or you can send this month to mom and this month to your wife or whatever. But that's where we preserve that super simple.
Cool. I like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
The rest of the site, the sort of regular e-commerce site, you'll see prices ranging from the low 40s up to $80. And those also have a $12 shipping fee. We sort of, the beginning, we gave the free shipping to everyone. And over time, what we found was our best customers were our subscribers. And we thought, let's reward those folks with the free shipping. And so lots of changes. Like I said, 93 people. I'm no longer the CEO of the business. In May of this year, we hired a CEO out of Amazon. His name's Alejandro Bethlin. He's an amazing leader, great person, loves our mission. And I'm in the chairman of the board role. And so we work together sort of hand in hand to continue to grow the company, which has been awesome since May. And but the core mission is exactly the same. It's vertically integrated back to the source, ensure quality, freshness, and sustainability, minimize the impact on the planet, and make sure that our partners are treating labor really well, and deliver the best quality flowers that we possibly can in the world across right now the country and eventually globally. So a lot has changed, but some things are still the same.
That's unbelievable how quickly you scaled. My question came to me. You talked about in the tank about the farms being around the volcano. Was there a challenge finding farms that had similar soil? And I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm not going to pretend to, but that seemed to be part of the makeup of your product. Was that a challenge as you scaled?
Yeah. So the Ecuador and Colombia out of South America are primary sources because of the quality of the product. You're on the equator, and so you get consistent sun year round, which leads to really good, quality blooms. And then you have really rich soil. And so that still maintains a really healthy proportion of what we sell. But that region does not grow every flower type. It obviously doesn't allow for homegrown American grown product, which we really wanted to offer. And so these different regions we source from have different strengths, right? American grown product is going to be more seasonal. Sometimes this is in season, sometimes it's not, because we get temperature swings. Mm-hmm. But we can deliver that product next day, and we can ensure that it's homegrown. Product in East and North Africa is going to be very different than what you see in South America. Ecuadorian roses are the biggest roses in the world, as we were talking about earlier. Sometimes the biggest rose isn't the best rose.
Right.
And so, we really look for variety, depth of product, and, we always focus on the highest quality, but, different regions bring different strengths to the table, and we try to leverage them to give our customers the best choice possible.
That's awesome. John, congratulations on all the success. I mean, it's so good to hear from entrepreneurs that have a great product, have a mission behind it, and are just thriving. And you guys are certainly doing that. So congratulations on that. And thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. You should check us out at Bouqs.com, Bouqs.com. It used to be thebouqs.com. After we raised some money, we actually could afford buying Bouqs.com. Believe it or not.
One more time, it's Bouqs.com now?
Bouqs.com, Bouqs.com. The Bouqs will still work, but right. Bouqs.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm at John G. Tabis or at the Bouqs Co. And, if folks want to connect on LinkedIn and, talk business, I'm always down to build a network.
Awesome. Thanks again, John.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back with more What Would You Ask podcast in a second.